Thank you very much. Can you help me understand the Army's urgent field need that embarked us on this never-before-used development and procurement protocol, obviously fraught with uncertainties?
We were involved in when the program, just before the program got started, and did hear the Army's rationale. I think they were looking ahead to next generation and to future forces, and they were looking at future combat systems as a replacement for the heavy force. It was going to replace M1s and Bradleys, but it was going to do so in such a way that a smaller force could have the combat power of a larger force. It would be easier to get the equipment into theater and easier to support it when it was there. So I think it was in terms of art, again, as long as we're talking, it was a capabilities-based decision that the Army thought it needed this capability for the future versus reacting to a particular threat. I think there was also a thought at the time that there was a limit to how much armor you could put on a vehicle, and some anti-armor weapons were outstripping the ability of armor to protect, and you'd have to take another step now to provide that protection, which now would be in the form of the information network.
But that relates only to specific vehicles, not to this very complex integrated system. Let me ask a couple of kind of practical questions here. Another provision that was initiated at the full committee level was the elimination of lead systems integrator, and I suspect future combat systems had something to do with that. Obviously, the lead systems integrator has an intimate relationship with the subs and communicates with them on a continuous basis to know what they're doing and are they really getting there. The usual contracting mechanism that we have, the Pentagon, have with the industry is that we interface only with the prime, and we see the subs only through this really dark prism of the prime. Do you think we ought to look at reconsidering that if in fact we're going to be the lead systems integrator?
I think so.
Mr. Francis,
yes.
When you answered that question, would you elucidate a little bit on what we mean by lead systems integrator? We know what we're talking about, but again, we're being viewed by people for whom that may not be a familiar phrase.
Certainly. A traditional contracting arrangement would be, say, between the government and a prime contractor. And this has been changing over time, but generally you look at that as an arm's length relationship where the government will write a set of requirements and the prime contractor is responsible for designing and building a system to meet those requirements. And the prime contractor brings with them all of their suppliers. So the government only has visibility really into that prime contractor. A lead system integrator. Now the DoD has been trying to get away from that over time. They've been going with integrated product teams and arrangements like that, so it's a closer working relationship. The lead system integrator is perhaps the closest working relationship that we've come across, and that's a situation where the government actually partners with a contractor, and the contractor helps the government make decisions about requirements. And what the government gets out of that then is, in the case of FCS, the government can participate in the selection of the contractor supplier, so they get a lot more visibility there. So it's you give up the arm's length relationship, but what you gain is joint decision making, and the government gets more insight into the supplier base. I think that enables...
that works two ways, doesn't it?
It works two ways.
Oh, yes.
Yes. It does make the government more agile, but then it becomes, in our view, a little more difficult for oversight because it's hard to separate the contractor's contribution from the government's contribution. But I do think insight into the suppliers is a benefit of that relationship. I think the government can get better insight without necessarily having to go through a lead system integrator relationship with another contractor. So I take your point. I think that there are lessons to be learned for the government. If the government is to be the integrator, it should find ways, I think, to get more visibility into the suppliers.
Thank you. One more kind of a common sense question. Obviously, we can increase the cost of these systems if we go too slow, and we increase the cost of the system if we try to go too fast, which is what we've done here. How do you know from the get-go whether you're going too fast or too slow? What's the right balance between these?
Mr. Bartlett, I think it's knowing where to go fast and where to go slow. And our view, and we've benchmarked this again against best practices in commercial industry, is you really need to do your risk-taking before you declare something to be a program that you're going to put on a fixed schedule and budget. So the place to experiment then is in the science and technology base, when you can explore, make mistakes, have failures, and decide what is then in the art of the possible. And the systems engineering discipline then gives you criteria that you can use to say when you know enough to actually commit to a schedule. So I would say if we have a robust science and technology phase where you can actually push those technologies and weed out the doable from the undoable, then I think you can have a pretty quick development phase for a system. So, for example, if you could trade off requirements so you get that match between mature technologies and requirements, I don't think it's unreasonable to think about a 5 or 6 year development phase, because you're focused only then on integrating the product and not worrying about technologies.
Didn't we do it very much quicker than that with MRAPs? We kind of broke all the rules there, didn't we? And I gather a pretty successful procurement.
Yes, but to a large extent, the homework had been done on those vehicles, the technology development and the integration. So we did some modifications to them, but we were able to buy them largely off the shelf.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to return to my initial question. This was obviously a very risky development and procurement protocol, and I was never appraised of the urgent field need. What enemy out there had capabilities that forced us to this very revolutionary protocol for developing and fielding this system? We kind of, you know, if there was that kind of thing out there, if this had the urgency, the Manhattan Project, then I understand, but I'm having some trouble understanding how we ever got started down this road with no really urgent field need out there that necessitated this kind of risk-taking.
Well, I think that would be a good question for the Army to answer. I do think a large part of it dealt with not so much a change in the threat, but the fact that the Army did have aging equipment and they were looking to replace it. But I think the Army should handle that one.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.